Hello everyone and welcome back to an Ascential Experts with me, Simon Charles, video creator and video training specialist here at Ascential. And today I'm talking to Mark Wagman, Managing Director at MediaLink, to talk about marketing in the post-cookie era. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks, man. So we're going to start off with the first question. We'll go straight into it.
Sure.
Can you start by giving us a bit of a brief overview of MediaLink and the different areas that you support clients across?
Yeah, absolutely. So MediaLink is a strategic advisory firm. We are laser focused at this intersection of media marketing, tech, entertainment, and even more so today, finance. Think about us as your partners in crime, your groups of consultants and advisors who are laser focused at this single kind of intersection in the marketplace. We all come from the industry, so we're all operators to some degree. We've come from buy side and sell side of the marketplace, so agencies and brands. We've come from technology providers, data providers, publishers, content, TV, broadcasters and networks, etc. And at MediaLink, I run our data and technology solutions practice. We call it DTS, but this is essentially, in this new world of data-driven marketing and all the experiences that marketers have from a digital perspective, I help kind of the buy side navigate that space, and the sell side create assets, products, opportunities for advertisers and marketers to kind of take advantage of the new world order. So my background, I was a big data engineer in a previous life. At MediaLink, one of my skill sets that I'm kind of known for here and in the industry is more of like a translator. I have a deep kind of technical background in terms of understanding the ones and zeros, but most of my consumers and customers, frankly, are the boardroom, right? Or the executives or the business leaders who are trying to understand how some of these technology changes impact their business. And so in a lot of cases, I'm translating pretty complex technology supply chains or value propositions to how that actually impacts a company's bottom line. It could be a bottom line, it could be a staffing model, it could be resources, it could be the competitive asset. But translation is, I think, one area where I strive.
Great, that's an amazing way to put it. You're like a data translator. Wow, cool. So obviously today we're talking about marketing in the post-cookie era. For those of us less in the know, what is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're not talking about chocolate chip cookies as much as I would love to. In the digital environment today, so when you visit a website, there are little pieces of code that essentially, for lack of a better term, track you across the web. They don't know who you are, but they know you as a string of numbers. That string of numbers is stored in a cookie. Cookies sit on your machine. No, you don't see them on a daily basis. Yes, you can get rid of them if you really wanted to, but cookies provide you not only things like areas to store passwords, right? So when you visit a website and things that are already pre-populated in a password window, or maintain a shopping cart, right? That helps you maintain the fact that you put a pair of shoes or a piece of clothing in a shopping cart. But a cookie is nothing more than a piece of code that sits within the browser. For years and years and years, right, this last era of this world of digital, the cookie has been more than just an ID. It's almost a currency, right? It is the linkage between how that marketing or that piece of digital advertising was planned, how it was executed and put in front of you and I as a consumer online, and how it was measured after the fact, right? It provided some linkage between those worlds. Now, what's happening today is, in North America, right, we have been largely an opt-out country for quite some time, right? You are by default opted into this level of tracking or level of identification, if you will, across the supply chain by default. In other parts of the world, other parts of the globe, it's very much an opt-in world. But in America, it's been historically an opt-out world. So if you wanted to opt out of some of these tracking capabilities today, you would have to actually look into your phone settings, right? And bury into those settings somewhere is some tick mark that you can uncheck or some box that you can click. But for the most part, we have been in an opt-out world. And so the cookie has been this ubiquitous piece of code across the web for quite some time. It is essentially how a lot of the programmatic ecosystem in which we operate today has been operating, right, for the last decade. Now, what is changing is the way that data can be collected, the way that data can be used, who can use that data, who can collect it, all the things that go into the governance of a cookie ID. Most platforms, most operating systems are putting that control back in front of you and are forcing you to explicitly opt in and opt out. And so a lot of the marketing campaigns out there right now, you look and see, Apple right now is in market with a lot of the changes that they have made right to their operating system. And so if you have an iOS device and you've downloaded the latest operating system, you've now seen pop-ups after pop-ups after pop-ups asking for your permission to actually track you. And I think that's going to be the new norm going forward with respect to asking for permission, asking for consent. Clearly already in place in other parts of the world, whether it's GDPR or other kind of country by country privacy regulation. But here stateside, I think we are just at the tipping point for this cookieless future, as I called it.
Cool. All right. So let me ask you a question just based on that then. Why is this such a critical change in direction for marketers?
Yeah. So because it impacts the way marketing is planned, because the cookie ID was used in terms of forecasting what might happen. It impacts the way the marketing is actually executed. So being able to optimize a live media campaign without actually understanding what impressions are working and what impressions aren't is very difficult. And then when we get to measurement, right, understanding what worked and what didn't after the fact, if you can't link those two things together, it becomes inherently impossible, right? And so there's certainly a new world order, or one of the scenarios that plays out, which is we move back to a world where the media ecosystem is simply silos or a series of walled gardens or series of kind of closed off internets, where if you're a marketer, you spend with those media properties, but you have no really good way of tying those performances together. Meaning, right, I advertise with publisher A and I advertise with publisher B. And today, the cookie ID may be the linkage to be able to help me understand what worked better or worse. In a future world, I have to kind of evaluate these things in silos.
So who do you think this will have the most impact on? So will it be the consumers, the marketers, or the media companies?
I think of those three, I think the media companies are going through the most change right now, right? So you and I as consumers, right, we're just seeing a bunch of pop-ups and we're having to make a decision whether we're opting in or opting out of advertising. And depending on the situation, right, we make those decisions. I think publishers have historically gone from a world where because of the ubiquity of a third-party cookie, right, up until now, in a lot of cases, it was the marketer who had the control. So a marketer would walk into a publishing partner and say, hey, I know you have people 18 to 35 in the market for my car, my automobile, my product. I know this because I'm going to buy a bunch of third-party cookies that tell me this. And as a result, I'm willing to pay X for this advertising, right? And they've had the control in that relationship. It's very, very one-sided, for lack of a better term. In this new world where that third-party cookie doesn't exist, that marketer now has to turn to their publishing partner or media partner and say, hey, how many 18 to 35-year-old women that fit my goals do you have? Or how many individuals or consumers do you have within your database that align to what I'm trying to do? And so I think those guys, the publishing content community, are the ones going through the most change right now, because historically they've been kind of reactive to a client demand. And now they've got to be a little bit more proactive. So you see a lot of publishers investing in data assets, investing in platforms so that they can get better at answering some of those questions and arguably get better at actually operationalizing the results of those questions.
Cool. So in terms of alternatives to cookie-led marketing, what types of innovative solutions are popping up across the spectrum of the media, marketing, and technology industry? So which ones are likely to have staying power?
Yeah. Before there was this concept of programmatic advertising, right? The genesis of marketing, at least in the digital world, started around this concept of context and content, right? If you were looking for a sports enthusiast and you couldn't track that sports enthusiast across the web, you bought relevant publishers that aligned and created content around sports. You bought Sports Illustrated, you bought Yahoo Sports, you bought ESPN, you bought the long tail sports ad network, whatever it was. So I think there's a couple things that are changing right now. One, yes, there are people trying to solve for a cookie replacement, right? You've got industry consortiums like the Unified ID 2.0 strategy. You've got private label solutions from companies like LiveRamp. Yes, there are some that are trying to solve for the next generation of identifier. It's not a one-for-one cookie replacement, right? It still requires opt-in. It requires an email address to do some of the linkages, but certainly on paper looks much more like a cookie replacement in terms of one-for-one swaps. But more broadly, I think we're certainly moving towards a world where context again matters, right? Where you see more brands leaning into, instead of trying to chase that individual across the web, right, looking for contextually rich opportunities. So if you align to sports, if you align to gaming, if you align to music, doubling down in those areas and working out partnerships and sponsorship opportunities to go well beyond just another banner ad, and to think about how more deeply ingrain your brand's message in that environment. So I think we're going to see context and content become king again. We're going to see the creative become a big deal again as well. So if you think about the last 10 years really being about, finding that individual and tracking them across, digital properties and apps and websites, et cetera, I think we're certainly at a new tipping point where now the messaging matters again. There are certainly fewer ad opportunities in the premium environments we care about. Right, there are fewer traditional linear TV spots than there were before. There are fewer spots on the streaming platforms where most of our eyeballs are at the top of the kind of concentration curve, if you will. And so I think we will see the creative itself start to differentiate itself. We spend all this time and money to find you, and then we still put the same 10% offer in front of you, right? How do we get better at the actual unit itself, the creative, that type of thing?
Are there any industries that you actually may feel are over-reliant on the use of cookies that may have the most work to do in order to connect with their customers in a post-cookie era?
Anybody who didn't have a relationship with the end consumer, right? And so if you don't have first-party data or data that's been explicitly collected from you and I as the consumer to say, hey, here's my name, here's my email address, here's a phone number, maybe. If you don't have that data, you've been historically reliant on third-party assets or third-party data providers. Now, over the last 3 to 5 to 10 years, call it even a decade, right? You've had most of these marketers have spent tons of money, tons of time to create big data warehouses, data lakes of all this first-party data. But now they're actually having to go use it. And so I don't necessarily think if there's any specific industry, right, that is worse off than others, right? CPG historically has had not a ton of first-party data, although a lot of those companies over the last couple of years have collected a bunch of first-party data. Auto has had great first-party data, but it's been small, right? It's been only the seed, if you will, and for a lot of cases they're relying on people in the market and relying on third parties to provide them that signal or transactional signal. And so I think the challenge for many marketers in today's world is not actually, oh my God, I don't have the data. It's I've got all this first-party data, but now I don't know how to operationalize it. Part of the idea of, part of the benefit of having third-party data readily off the shelf was it was turnkey, right? It was already integrated into the ecosystem, already integrated into the supply chain. Within a couple of clicks or a couple of drop-down menus within the platform, I could start targeting individuals. But now, if I've got all this data sitting in a data warehouse or in a cloud somewhere, and now I've got to extract that data, make sure that I have the right to go use it, govern that data, clean it, that kind of thing, right? It's a different ballgame to make that data available and actionable than it was ever before.
So there actually seems to have been a bit of a backlash against overly personalized marketing in recent years. So how do you think brands can get closer to customers in a more authentic or less invasive way moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, what you're discussing is the creepiness factor, right? So I think if you talk to consumers in this market, consumers don't hate advertising. What consumers hate is irrelevant advertising and creepy advertising. And so, right, it's the pair of shoes that follow you around for 6 months, even though you bought them, right? And it's the advertising that isn't relevant to me. I think there's a fine line between, again, the creepiness and the personalization aspect of this. And I think when we hear about tailored advertising, when we hear about addressable advertising and one-to-one, our minds immediately go to a world of kind of the creepy factor, right? But I think if you talk to any consumer right now, yes, right, I'd gladly trade access to content in exchange to be served advertisements, as long as those advertisements that I am being served are relevant to what I care about, right? And so I think that's next level of personalization is what we here at MediaLink are helping a lot of our clients kind of figure out right now.
Amazing, man. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But Mark, before you do go, where can we find information, obviously, about yourself and learn more about MediaLink and your work?
Yep. So we're online, go figure, at MediaLink.com. And then if you want to get in contact with me or any of my data and technology solutions teammates and colleagues, we are at dts@MediaLink.com. And we'll get back to you as quickly as we can.
Awesome. Mark, man, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.